The ethnonym Afghan has been used in the past to denote a member of the Pashtuns, and that usage still persists in some places in Afghanistan. The name Afghanistan, Afghanistan, Afghan plus Stan, is a derivation from the ethnonym Afgân, originally in the loose meaning, land of the Pashtuns, and referred to the Pashtun tribal areas south of the Hindu Kush mountains. In the 3rd century, the Sassanids mentioned an eastern tribe called Abgân, which is attested in its Arabic form Afgân in the 10th century Ḥudūd al-ʿādam. Through the 19th century, the term Afghan was used by various writers as a synonym for Pashtun, but such usage now is rare in English. Since the Afghan Constitution of 1964, Afghan officially refers to every citizen of the state of Afghanistan, regardless which ethnic group the individual belongs to. Origin of the names Afghan. The earliest mention of the name Afghan, Abgân, is by Shapur I of the Sassanid Empire during the 3rd century CE, which is later recorded in the 6th century in the form of the Vargana by the Indian astronomer Varaha Mihira in his Brihat Samhita. The Encyclopedia Irainica explains, from a more limited, ethnological point of view, Afghan is the term by which the Persian speakers of Afghanistan, and the non-Pashto-speaking ethnic groups generally, designate the Pashtun. The equation of Afghan and Pashtun has been propagated all the more, both in and beyond Afghanistan, because the Pashtun tribal confederation is by far the most important in the country, numerically and politically. The term Afghan has probably designated the Pashtun since ancient times, under the form of Argana. This ethnic group is first mentioned by the Indian astronomer Varaha Mihira in the beginning of the 6th century in his Brat Samhita. Quote, Hivan Siang, a Chinese Buddhist pilgrim visiting the Afghanistan area several times between 630 and 644 CE, speaks about the native tribes inhabiting the region. According to scholars such as V. Minorski, W. K. Frazier Tyler and M. C. Gillett, the word Afghan has appeared in the 982 Ḥudūd al-ʿādam, where a reference is made to a village, Saul, a pleasant village on a mountain. In it live Afghans. Saul was probably located near Gardez, in the Paksha province of Afghanistan. Ḥudūd al-ʿādam also speaks of a king Nangarhar, who shows a public display of conversion to Islam, even though he has over 30 wives, which are described as Muslim, Afghan, and pagan or Hindu wives. It should be noted that some of these names were used as geographical terms. For example, Hindu has been used historically as a geographical term to describe someone who was native from the general region known as Hindustan or the Indian subcontinent. Al-ʿūtbi, the Ghaznavid chronicler, in his Tarikh-i-Yamani records that many Afghans and Khiljis, possibly the modern Giji, enlisted in the army of Sabuktigin after Jayapala was defeated. The Afghans and Khiljis who resided among the mountains having taken the oath of allegiance to Subuktigin, many of them were enlisted in his army, after which he returned in triumph to Ghazni. Quote, Al-ʿūtbi further states that Afghans and Gijis made a part of Mahmud Ghaznavi's army and were sent on his expedition to Tokristan. While on another occasion Mahmud Ghaznavi attacked and punished a group of opposing Afghans, as also corroborated by Abul Fazl al-Bayhaqi. In the 11th century, Afghans are mentioned in al-Biruni's Tarikh ul-Hind, History of India, which describes groups of rebellious Afghans in the tribal lands west of the Indus River in what is today Pakistan. It is recorded that Afghans were also enrolled in the Ghurud Kingdom, 1148–1215. By the beginning of the Khilji dynasty in 1290, Afghans have been well known in northern India. Ibn Battuta, a famous Moroccan traveler, visiting Afghanistan following the era of the Khilji dynasty in 1333, writes, "We traveled on to Kabul, formerly a vast town, the site of which is now occupied by a village inhabited by a tribe of Persians called Afghans. They hold mountains and defiles and possess considerable strength, and are mostly highwaymen. Their principal mountain is called Kush. It is told that the Prophet Solomon, ascended this mountain and having looked out over India, which was then covered with darkness, returned without entering it." Quote, a 16th century Muslim historian writing about the history of Muslim rule in India states, he, Khalid bin Abdullah, son of Khalid bin Walid, retired, therefore, with his family, and a number of Arab retainers, into the Sulayman Mountains, situated between Multan and Peshawar, where he took up his residence, and gave his daughter in marriage to one of the Afghan chiefs, who had become a proselyte to Mohammedism. From this marriage many children were born, among whom were two sons famous in history, the one Lodi, the other Saw, who each, subsequently, became head of the tribes which to this day bear their name. I have read in the Mutla al-Anwar, a work written by a respectable author, and which I procured at Burhanpur, a town of Khandesh in the Deccan, that the Afghans are Copts of the race of the pharaohs, and that when the prophet Moses got the better of that infidel who was overwhelmed in the Red Sea, many of the Copts became converts to the Jewish faith, but others, stubborn and self-willed, refusing to embrace the true faith, leaving their country, came to India, and eventually settled in the Sulamani Mountains, where they bore the name of Afghans. Quote, in the writings of the 17th century Pashtu poet Kushal Khattak, it states, "Pull out your sword and slay anyone that says Pashtun and Afghan are not one." Arabs know this and so do Romans. Afghans are Pashtuns. Pashtuns are Afghans. Quote, Afghanistan. The last part of the name Stan is a Persian suffix for place of, the Pashtu translation of which is stony prominent in many languages of Asia. The name Afghanistan is mentioned in writing by the 16th century Mughal rulers Babur and his descendants, referring to the territory between Khorasan, Kabulistan, and the Indus River, which was inhabited by tribes of Afghans. The road from Khorasan leads by way of Kandahar. It is a straight level road, and does not go through any hill passes. In the country of Kabul there are many and various tribes. Its valleys and plains are inhabited by Turks, Amaks, and Arabs. In the city and the greater part of the villages, the population consists of Tajiks *, Sarts. Many other of the villages and districts are occupied by Pashais, Parashis, Tajiks, Barikis, and Afghans. In the hill country to the northeast lies Kafiristan, such as Qatar and Gebrek. To the south is Afghanistan. Quote, the name Afghanistan is also mentioned many times in the writings of the 16th century historian Farisha, and many others. The men of Kabul and Khilj also went home, and whenever they were questioned about the Mussulmans of the Kohistan, the mountains, and how matters stood there, they said, "Don't call it Kohistan, but Afghanistan, for there is nothing there but Afghans and disturbances." Thus, it is clear that for this reason the people of the country call their home in their own language Afghanistan, and themselves Afghans. The people of India call them Pathan. However, the reason for this is not known. But it occurs to me that when, under the rule of Mohammedan sovereigns, Mussulmans first came to the city of Patna, and dwelt there, the people of India, for that reason, called them Pathans. But God knows. Quote, regarding the modern state of Afghanistan, the Encyclopedia of Islam explains, the country now known as Afghanistan has borne that name only since the middle of the 18th century. when the supremacy of the Afghan race became assured. Previously various districts bore distinct appellations. However, the country was not a definite political unit, and its component parts were not bound together by any identity of race or language. The earlier meaning of the word was simply, the land of the Afghans, a limited territory which did not include many parts of the present state but did comprise large districts now either independent or within the boundary of British India. Pakistan. Quote, Ashvaka. The etymological view supported by numerous noted scholars is that the name Afghan evidently derives from Sanskrit asvakas, q.v. the Asakanoi of Aryan. This view was propounded by scholars like Christian Lasson, J. W. McCrindle, M. V. de St. Martin, and E. Recluse, and has been supported by numerous modern scholars. In Sanskrit, the word Ashva, Iranian Aspa, Prakrit Asa, means horse, and Ashvaka, Prakrit Asaka, means horseman, horse people, land of horses, as well as horse breeders. Pre-Christian times knew the people of the Hindu Kush region as Ashvakas, horsemen, since they raised a fine breed of horses and had a reputation for providing expert cavalrymen. The 5th century BCE Indian grammarian Panini calls them Ashvakayana and Ashvayana. Mahabharata mentions them as Ashvaka. Classical writers, however, use the respective equivalents Aspajoroi, or Aspasi, Hippasi, and Asakanoi, or Asaseni, Asakani, Asinus, etc. The Aspajoroi, Asakanoi, Ashvakas equals cavalrymen, is stated to be another name for the Kambojas of ancient texts because of their equestrian characteristics. Alexander Cunningham and a few other scholars identify these designations with the modern name, Afghan. The Indian epic Mahabharata speaks about Cambodia as among the finest horsemen, and ancient Pali texts describe their lands as the land of horses. Cambodians spoke Avestan language and followed Zoroastrianism. Some scholars believe Zoroastrianism originated in land of Cambojas. The former Aspans of Chitral and Yashkins of Gilgit are identified as the modern representatives of the Pan-Indian Asvakayanas, Greek, Asakanoi, and the ASIP, ISAP, cf. ASPAs I greater than Yusufzai. In the Kabul Valley, between the rivers Kabul and Indus, are believed to be modern representatives of the Pan-Indian Asvayanas, Greek, Aspajoroi, respectively. Historical suggestions. There are a number of other hypotheses suggested for the name historically, all of them obsolete. The Marzani-Afghan by Nimat Allah al-Harawi, written in 1612 at the Mughal court, traces the name Afghan to an eponymous ancestor, an Afghana, identified as a grandson of Sol. Afghana was supposedly a son of Jeremiah, who was in turn a son of Sol. Tallu. Afghana was orphaned at a young age, and brought up by David. When Solomon became king, Afghana was promoted as the commander-in-chief of the army. Neither Afghana nor Jeremiah son of Saul figure in the Hebrew Bible. Some 4 centuries after Afghana, in the 6th century BCE, Bakhtanazar, or Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, attacked the kingdom of Judah and exiled the descendants of Afghana, some of whom went to the mountains of Ghor in present-day Afghanistan and some to the neighborhood of Mecca in Arabia. Until the time of Muhammad, the deported children of Israel of the East continually increased in number in the countries around Ghor, which included Kabul, Kandahar and Ghazni, and made wars with the infidels around them. Khalid bin Walid is said to belong to the tribe of descendants of Afghana in the neighborhood of Mecca, although actually he was from the tribe of Quraysh. After conversion to Islam, Khalid invited his kinsmen, the children of Israel of Ghor, to Islam. A deputation led by Qais proceeded to Medina to meet Muhammad and embraced Islam. Muhammad lavished blessings on them and gave the name Abdur Rashid to Qais, who returned to Ghor successfully to propagate Islam. Qais had 3 sons, Sarban, Batan and Gawagusht, who were progenitors of the various Pashtun tribes. Samuel G. Benjamin, 1887, derived the name Afghan from a term for wailing, which the Persians are said to have contemptuously used for their plaintive eastern neighbors. H. W. Bellew, in his 1891 An Inquiry into the Ethnography of Afghanistan, believes that the name Afgân comes from Alban, which derives from the Latin term albus, meaning white or mountain, as mountains are often white-capped with snow. Cf. Alps, used by Armenians as Alvan or Alwyn, which refers to mountaineers, and in the case of transliterated Armenian characters, would be pronounced as Agvan or Iguan. To the Persians, this would further be altered to Aoan, Afghan, and Afghan as a reference to the Eastern Highlanders or mountaineers. Michanovsky suggests the name Afghan derives from Sanskrit of Argana, which in turn derives from the ancient Sumerian word for Badakhshan, Abgân, or high country. There are also a few people who have attempted to link Afghan to an Uzbek word, Afgân, said to mean original. See also Asvakas, Pashtun people, Saw, Pashtun tribe. List of country name etymologies.